Hi all, this is a simple video which talks about information gathering and software analysis and design, right? So the major learning objectives is what are the different ways where we could find out the problem statement, and from the problem statement itself, how would you identify the functional requirements, non-functional requirements, what are the different fact-finding methods and techniques that will help you to do a proper uh, functional requirement gathering. Now, so the information requirements itself, it is very important for any problem, right? Because if you want to proceed with a problem, it is very important that information gathering is very important. So it's like requirements discovery, the fact finding, data collection, all are very important part of it, and it's all related to, I mean, like it's all nothing but information gathering itself. So system requirement is nothing but what the information system must do, and there are two different type of requirements as such. One is functional requirements and the other one is non-functional requirements. So when it comes to the functional requirements, it is as simple as that. It will just explain how the system work, and non-functional requirements will explain how the system should perform, right? So non-functional requirements always cares about the performance, and functional requirements always care about what is the system actually do, what does the system do. So functional requirements helps to understand the various functions, and they are mandatory and they are easy to define because it's very obvious and visible, and it describes what the product does. It concentrates on users requirement, and the functionality is it is easy for us to verify, and the requirements are basically specified by the user according to the application they require. But as non-functional requirements are concerned, it is more of performance. It is very difficult to define because it is something which comes as, it's not mandatory, it comes as part of it, right? It's the performance. So it's, you will be able to do that only while describing the system. I mean, like, only the system is actually on the run, and these requirements are specified by the system software developers, architects, and technical persons. And one example of functional requirements and non-functional requirements I could say is that authentication of a user while trying to log in. It's a function, right? And the sales system should allow the users to record the customer sales. But when you look at what is the color of the website, it has to be, the website should be capable to handle 20 million users. These are all part of the performance. So if you are not having the right requirements, or if you have having incorrect requirements, the whole thing goes topsy-turvy, right? So the system may cost more than the project and a projected amount or the expected amount. The system may be delivered later than it is promised, and the systems may not meet the user's expectations at all. The cost of maintaining the system might become higher. The system may become unreliable completely. So how can we actually fix this? So there is a relative cost which is associated with each, I mean, like, each of the requirements, design, coding, and everything. So there is a cost ratio which is associated with each one of them. So there is a requirements discovery process as such. I mean, like, when you identify and analyze the problems, and you can discover the requirements by a proper analysis, and you can document and analyze the requirements, and you can manage the requirements which you have. So for doing that problem analysis, we have already seen about the Ishikawa diagram. If you don't know about the Ishikawa diagram, you can basically go back to this channel and check out to Ishikawa diagram. I will also give that in the description box. And Ishikawa diagram will basically help you to do a thorough root cause analysis or cause effect analysis. So by doing an Ishikawa diagram, you will be able to understand all the problems related to this problem statement which you're actually looking forward to. Now, there are different ways for fact finding, right? So maybe, the fact finding is like, the system analysts want to contact with sensitive information there, like company plans, the employee salaries, the customer credit card details, right? So there are so many ethical behaviors associated with this, because the system analysts may misuse this information, right? So they should not. So system analysts must protect the information from people who would misuse it. So it's kind of a very important or very confidential, and the people who with a lot of credibility has to work as system analysts. So there are different ways of fact finding, right? So I mean, like, say if you already have a project and which is already documented in different ways, you can use those documentations, forms, or databases which are already available. You can research and visit various websites and gather more information. And observation of the work environment is one way to understand about the system itself. And questionnaires or surveys could be one of the options. You can interview certain people who knows well about what your problem is all about or already dealt with that problem. And prototyping, maybe you can come out with a miniature model of it and then extend it to your model. And joint application development, like brainstorming or group discussions, where you could actually brainstorm and try to come out, what exactly it is. So the first one is basically sampling. Sampling is basically, collecting the information from the documents. It could be from dashboard, organizational chart, the memo, standard operating procedures, which is already set for your company, and completed forms. So it could be from the flow chart or something which is already there as part of the databases, right? They can get the information from there. So the sampling, of completed forms will help, like, it will help you to identify, like, there will be certain, you can check out the forms and understand whether all the blanks are actually filled, or is there any blanks, or why is that blank, so you can analyze like that. And one way of understanding about this sampling of existing documentation is by a simple formula called understanding the sample size. And how could you do that is, this is a simple formula which you have to use: 0.25 into certainty factor divided by acceptable error. Say if you have a desired certainty of 90%, its corresponding certainty factor, when you see here, it is 1.645. Okay, so it is from this chart. So this chart will be given to you, or the certainty factor will be given to you. Now, what would be, say, if the desired certainty is 90%, what would be the error? 100 minus 90%, so 0.10% or 0.10, right? You can simply apply it over the formula. So 0.25 into this certainty percentage is certainty factor is 1.645, because as it is 90%, divided by acceptable error. Acceptable error is 0.10, the whole square. So the whole square. So that is almost 68. So almost 68 percentage of the content you can get it from your sampling documentation. So this is exactly how you will do for the sampling. And the other one is observation. That is, you can look around what is happening, you can watch the people, how they are working, you can understand what are the advantages of the already existing system, disadvantages of already existing system, and then you can actually keep moving forward. And when you there are certain guidelines which you could follow: determine who, what, where, why. So the 6 whys and H, the 5 whys and H could be used. So it is called 5 why H. And you can obtain a permission to from appropriate supervisors, inform them who will be observed for what purposes. So it's kind of a shadowing which is done. You can take notes, you can observe what they are doing, how don't interrupt the individuals at work, so don't focus heavily on trivial activities. Then comes questionnaires. So when it is questionnaires, you can form in different ways. One is free format questionnaire, one is fixed format questionnaire. So when you think about a problem, you can actually come out with your own questions, or you can come out with free form questions. Like, you can just ask a question so that the people will write their answers in the way they want, or you can have a fixed format questions, like selecting the answers from the choices. So it's kind of more of choices. So if you are using ranking questions or rating questions, or like multiple choice, you can go for that fixed format questions. And when you are developing the questionnaire, you should clearly have an you should clearly have an idea about what is the facts that you want to collect and from whom you have to collect, and whether it is free format or a fixed format, and what are the questions which you have to write for collecting those information, and test questions on a small group of people and see whether it actually works, and then distribute the questionnaire. And then comes the interviews. So interviews are basically very formal interviews. It could be a personal interview, and the techniques of collecting facts from individual based on the face-to-face meeting. So finding facts, verifying it, clarifying it, and generating the enthusiasm between the people, and getting the end user involved in the meeting to have clarity about what's the end product that you're going to make, and identifying the requirements, and again verifying it and soliciting your ideas and opinions. So there will be advantages and disadvantages on this as well, because budget is a constraint, time is a constraint, so what you can actually provide or give it to them is a constraint. So there are a lot many interviews as well, but still you are gathering more information here. And there are different type of interviews available. One is unstructured interview, which is not planned in detail but conducted to a general picture on subject. But there are structured interviews as well if you want to get a very detailed and technical answers to be maybe from time to time. Maybe you need an interview at an intermediate stage of your product. And there are different type of interview questions. You can have open-ended questions or closed-ended questions. So say, what do you like most about something, so that you can ask as an open-ended question. And there could be closed-ended questions like, do you ever use Microsoft? So it's an yes or no question, right? So you can also have this kind of questions. And interview procedure. So while taking the interview procedure, you have to very carefully identify the interviewees. Whom are you going to interview to get this corresponding information? And you have to prepare well for the interview, and you have to conduct the interview in the proper way, in the formal manner, and follow up on the interview. Send a letter that summarizing the interview, that okay, this is what is done and I'm very happy with your answers and all this stuff. So when you look at the interview guideline, this is the interview format, so who is the interviewee, what's the date, time, place, subject, and what are the interview questions, so how many minutes you have actually taken for each question, and what is your response. So this is the format which you will even use for your project as well. So this is what is expected to you to be there in the interview form in your project as well. And so this is kind of a sample one which you could actually look into later. So there are different type of questions, as I said, there are certain questions which you could avoid as well, but like loaded questions, should a smack as part of the good parental correction be offense. So it's kind of too complicated questions. There could be leading questions, you could be biased questions. So such kind of questions it's better to avoid. So use clear and concise language. Don't use your opinionated. Don't go for opinionated questions. Avoid long and complex questions, and avoid threatening questions, and don't use you or kind of like mean group of people. So that you have to avoid. So there is a formal way of conducting the interviews as well. So there is a pretty good do and don'ts when you have to do it. So when you are conducting the interview, along the period which we have given to you, you have to follow all this and come out with the exact form, and you have to finish all those as part of these slides. Then the next one is like communicating with the user. So it is very important that you are communicating with the user, so that approach within the session should be a positive attitude, and how the patient, whether you have to make the person feel more comfortable, and whether you understood the answer or not. You should make sure that you're showing as if you are listening and asking questions, and like not with much assumptions. And it is always good to take notes. And the next one is about the body language, the facial disclosure, the eye contact, the posture. So all these things are very, very important. And the other one is like the proxemics. It's about the relationship between the people and the space around them. So it should be like how close you have to actually sit with the person for an interview. And then comes about the discovery prototyping. This is mainly about creating a small working pilot model, so that you can identify what are the advantages, and then keep moving forward. And the last one is basically it's joint application development, which is to expedite the discovery of the system requirements in such a way of where you could use group meetings or brainstorming or something like that. So JAT meetings, main participants in that meeting will be, it's simple. Who is actually the sponsor, and there will be a facilitator who actually manages and everything, and users and managers will be their scribes and IT staff. And normally it is better to keep it at a location which is away from the workplace, so that you're equipped with a proper formal structure where you can conduct an interview, you can select the participants and prepare the agenda, and finally after the meeting there should be some closing summary for your meeting as well. And there should be a typical room format, which is with a screen and computer projector, etc. So it's a formal setup which has been used for that. And unreasonably don't deviate from this. So there should be a facilitator who will actually bring them back to the topic if they are deviating from the topic. Stay on the schedule, and ensure that the scribe is always able to make notes. That is, there should be one person who makes notes minutes of meeting. Avoid the use of technical jargons, and try to make explicit and be clear about what you're telling. Avoid conflict resolution skills. Apply all the conflict resolution skills, and allow for ample breaks, so that people are not overwhelmed with a lot of ideas and saturated at a point. And encourage group consensus, and encourage user and management participation without allowing individuals to dominate the session. and make sure that it abide by the established ground rules for the session. So there are certain factors that which you have to use for joint application development. And in JAD, one main process which you could see is the brainstorming. So brainstorming is kind of a common approach which is used to encourage the participants to offer their ideas. And there is nothing called, you are prejudged about it. So you can brainstorm and get the ideas from the people. And there are so many benefits for JAD as well, because it involves user and the management to work along with the project development. It reduces the amount of the time required to develop systems. So there are various fact-finding strategy which we have already seen. One is about taking the data from the existing reports or documents. Then you can observe how the system basically is in action already, and design and distribute questionnaires or surveys that you could get more information from the people. And you can conduct interviews, and you can build a small prototype, or you can even follow up to verify the facts. So there are different ways of information gathering. So this is what we have actually seen in this video. So if you have any doubts or anything like that, you can always get back to me. But other than that, this is a short session just to know about what is a functional requirement. Now we'll just see an example of how to come out with the functional requirements and non-functional requirements with an example. So here in this session, it's very simple example which we have taken. Basically, this example basically shows you about how to write the functional requirements and non-functional requirements of ChatGPT. So all of you know that what is a ChatGPT as of now. So probably when you look at the ChatGPT for what all things we will use ChatGPT for. So we will use ChatGPT for natural language understanding, right? ChatGPT can understand the questions which you give it, and it can interpret the answers, right? And some information generation is happening, response generation is happening there, and some continuous learning is happening, right? If I'm giving you some feedback, it should be able to give it back to me as a response. So it's kind of a continuous learning which is happening. And personalized responses, because if I ask something related to my question, I need to get some answers related to in the way I want. And sentiment analysis, that is emotions, the user's emotional tone is actually captured. And integration with other systems, and automatic translation. So these are all the major functionalities that ChatGPT has to do. Okay, so these are all the major functions. Now, on the performance factor, if you could see, accuracy is very important, because I want ChatGPT to respond in a faster mode. I don't want ChatGPT to take a lot of time while explaining while looking for the answers. Okay, so I want the response time to be faster, right? And then response speed, that means it has to respond within 1 second of time. Then scalability, even if more users try to access ChatGPT, it should work. The server should not be down, and it should not make me wait. And reliability has an error rate of this many percentage when providing responses to the users. Security, if I'm asking something, the data has to be protected, and the user information cannot be revealed by ChatGPT, right? Then adaptability, the customer responses based on the information provided by the users. So you can use the past conversation history and language preferences to answer these questions, right? So it has to adapt. So there should be some adaptive learning which is happening. Ease of use, almost at least 90% of the users should say that it is easy to use and intuitive. And availability, so it should be guaranteed to almost every user who use that particular system. And even if there is any failure, it should be able to recover within 30 minutes of time. So these are all the non-functional requirements when you think about ChatGPT. And basically I got this functional requirements and non-functional requirements from ChatGPT itself. So initially I got a very similar, a very generic one. So I was asking them to come out with something very specific, and I was able to get this. And I really got this from one of a famous website as well. So this is all about how you can actually gather the functional requirements and non-functional requirements. So when it comes to the functional requirements, you are actually aiming at getting the main functionalities of the system, that how the system work. And when you look at the non-functional requirements, you are mainly aiming at the performance of the system, which you cannot see just like that. Okay, so that's all it is. So we have seen about functional requirements, non-functional requirements, one example of that, and the various ways of collecting the functional requirements and non-functional requirements. So that's all about it. So hope you understood the session really well. And if you have any questions or anything like that, you can always get back to me. Thank you so much.